YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back with another offseason video for you guys. Today I have 10 NFL starters that will very likely get cut this upcoming offseason. So we'll break down those players, maybe some surprises, and we'll break down the cap savings as well for those teams if those players get cut. At the end of the video, I want to take a look at the Saints separately because the Saints they're an intriguing option. They're always an intriguing option in the offseason. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So offseason content kind of rolling out here at the Goat House. We have in-season content always. We have I can't wait for our playoff content, and then in the offseason, loads of offseason content. So join us, like, subscribe to notifications on, follow us on Twitter. Very important. There's a link pinned in the comments for that, as well as our sponsors, GLD Shop, Liquid IV. Got the Titans chain from the GLD Shop. This video talking about a lot of Titans players or players that used to play for the Titans. I noticed that. So it's almost a Titans video partially here. So you'll see what I mean. But first one, Titans player. Taylor Lewan's going to be cut this offseason. He's going to get cut. The talent level maybe not is where it was, where he was maybe an elite tackle one day. I definitely still think he can play. But the injuries keep piling up for him, unfortunately. And he's missed this entire season. But the Titans, who are very low on cap space. They're in the negative for cap space in 2023. They need to make some room, and this will be one move, or at least one move that they make here. $14.841 million is how much they save by moving on from Taylor Lewan. Now, they'll need another tackle pretty badly. Petit Frere looks pretty promising, the rookie from Ohio State, but they're going to need another tackle. Dennis Daly has not been good for them, obviously, and they have Radens, but I really don't know where they like him, guard or tackle. I'm not sure if they really know yet, too, so that's an interesting situation. But definitely feel like Lewan will be cut this offseason. The Titans will free that, and he'll probably sign somewhere a lot cheaper than that. And, if he stays healthy, it's a starting left tackle for somebody. Could it even be the Titans again, very cheap if he kind of lasts in free agency, hangs around for a little bit. It's a possibility. So the Titans are one of those teams. There's a lot of teams that need to free space. The Titans, it's not good that they're negative cap space, but they do have some good options to free that space. Some teams just don't have easy ways to free that space. And another Titans one is Robert Woods, which was a low-risk trade. They didn't trade much, but has not really worked out for them. So maybe similar to the Julio Jones situation where they brought him in. We thought it'd be a lot better. That didn't really work out. Obviously, could be gone after one season. So, yeah, just Woods is surprisingly just have not been active for them. He's been active on the field, but not in terms of production, getting open, making big plays like we thought maybe he'd do a little bit of. Thought it was a pretty good fit with the Titans. So, he's been almost non-existent at times, so it was a little surprising. But getting up there in age, coming off some injuries, obviously. But if the Titans cut Woods, which I'm definitely expecting it, they would free $12.016 million. So, the Titans have some ways to free cap space, and we are not done with the Titans yet. Zach Cunningham, the linebacker they got from the Texans last year. They picked up off waivers, actually. The Texans released him. He played pretty well for them last year. Played very well, actually. This year, when he's played, not so much, but he's also been pretty, beat up as well. Has missed quite a few games here. So they'll probably move on from Cunningham as well and free that $9.25 million. They would rather have that money to maybe extend a guy like David Long Jr., who's been a fantastic linebacker for them. So you see three Titans guys on this video that I'm pretty confident they'll cut. Even maybe consider Bud Dupree, but the savings is just under $10 million. Is it worth it to move on from a very solid pass rusher? He does have the injury concern, so maybe it's not worth it to keep it to him. So that's kind of another one to look out for. But these three guys I do expect to get cut. So the Titans kind of featured in this video quite a bit already, and in a way, they're kind of related to some of these other guys. And Corey Davis might be a surprising one here, a former Tennessee Titan, but now a New York Jet. If the Jets cut him, be a $10.5 million cap savings there. But they could keep him because they can kind of keep that receiver unit together. But he's had some minor injuries pop up. He hasn't been super productive. They have Garrett Wilson, who's been excellent. And they have Elijah Moore, who they've been playing more and trying to get going a little bit more. And they've been doing a great job in the draft. So Corey Davis, one more year left in his deal. They could clear 10.5 cutting him, and they could look to the mid-round of the draft. They like using Berrios a bit as well. So this is an interesting one. They could keep him. Do they think it's worth it to keep him instead of clearing that $10.5 million? It's a possibility, but again, has he played up to that? And they like the two other receivers, it seems, more. And could they kind of lean on the draft a little bit because they've done an excellent job with that? I could definitely see that. So this is a very strong possibility, even though it might be a little bit of a surprise here. So $10.5 million cleared if the Jets move on from Corey Davis. And teams should be interested in him, but a little cheaper than that, obviously, maybe around that $7.5, $8 million possibly per year, 1 year deal perhaps. Definitely could see that. And we talk about some of the Titans players, guys that were on the Titans. Here's another one, Marcus Mariota, who was on the Falcons this year, was a starter for every week up until this week. It's going to be Desmond Ridder in a couple days. And Mariota kind of left the team, but I think he was having a kid, and then some sort of injury popped up as well. So interesting situation. But Mariota will be cut. The Falcons will cut him. They'll clear that $12 million. No use having a quarterback on the bench that is where you can save $12 million. They'd rather save the $12 million is what I'm saying. And it sounds like they're not thrilled with each other at the moment either. So this is one that will happen. The way they signed him to that 2-year deal, it kind of felt like at the time, like they're probably going to do it. You kind of could have predicted and be very accurate at the time of signing that, like, he'll play and start for them this year, but they're probably going to cut him after that 1 year, and that's kind of the case here, saving that $12 million here. So this is one I definitely expect to happen. So enough talking about guys that either played for the Titans or on the Titans. Talk about some other guys here. This was an obvious one, and Wentz isn't a starter right now, but he was a starter to start the year, obviously, and who knows, a team probably will sign him and start him maybe week 1 next year. People are insisting on Wentz because the talent's in there somewhere. He showed it at a very high level in the past, but injuries and time have passed, and that's kind of affected him. But the Commanders will cut Wentz, and they will save a whopping $26.176. I mean, that's not crazy money for a quarterback, I guess, but it's a good amount of money. So this one definitely will happen, and he will get another trial somewhere else, or will he be possible he goes to be a second-string quarterback somewhere where, like, the first string is not, sure thing, started the whole year, a little bit of questions. Possibly I could see that as well. But the Commanders will move on from Wentz, and they'll continue to search for the QB1. And it could be Heineke, but they've been trying to replace anybody they've had. They've been trying to replace the Heinekes, So I think they'll be on the hunt for an even better quarterback, but they could very well end up with Heineke again. But a lot of savings here, and this was one where we saw the Commanders trade for Wentz, and most of us went, yeah, it'll start for them this year, but they'll probably move on again next year. But some people were probably like, yeah, they traded a bit for him, so do they really want to cut him the next year? Well, it turned out he's lost his job there as a starter, so the Commanders will move on from him and save that money there. None of it is guaranteed, luckily, so that's like the only good news of that trade, I guess. Next one, this is an interesting one as well, maybe a surprising one with the Vikings, but Eric Kendricks, who's been one of the better linebackers in football for the last several years, has not been great this year, but the defense hasn't been great. They switch schemes to a 3-4. We see linebackers all the time take either a big step up or step down, depending on the scheme change. A lot of times step down when he's already good and the team switches the scheme. So it's pretty clear that Kendricks is a 4-3 inside linebacker. Doesn't fit the 3-4 as good. So couple reasons they could cut him here for that. And the Vikings are negative in cap space for this upcoming offseason, and not a ton of easy ways to clear that space. So they could move on from Kendricks and clear that $9.5 million. It's tricky because he's just a year ago, one of the top linebackers in football, very good. Could you really cut him? Could you try to trade him? Possibly try to trade him. But, it didn't really help that he hasn't been playing that great this year. He hasn't been, like, awful or anything like that. But kind of looking at the situation, the Vikings very well could move on from Donatell, after their defense coordinator, after this season, and maybe they switch back to a 4-3. That's possible as well, but maybe he's going to be 32. Maybe they move on from him and they need that space pretty badly. So this isn't one I'm as confident as some of those other ones we talked about that I said will happen for sure. But it's actually a bigger possibility than what people are talking about here. So it's probably going to depend on the Vikings finding ways to clear space and what their defense will look like, who's going to be the coordinator, what scheme do they go. I wish they would have just stayed to the 4-3 the whole time because they had players that fit the 4-3, so that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But there were some rumors about them maybe trading guys like this in the offseason, so maybe they just wanted to head that direction. They were good with the change. So interesting, but it's definitely a very interesting one to look out for here, Kendricks and the Vikings. Next one, Frank Clark, the Chiefs pass rusher, who's been fantastic for them. He's been better than expected this year. And he's a solid pass rusher that we know he fits the Chiefs. He's been a big part of that team, obviously. But you say they save a whopping $21 million in cap this offseason by moving on from Frank Clark. So definitely worth it to move on from him. I think this could be a situation where they cut him and then maybe they try to rework the deal, or maybe they bring him back for a lot cheaper than that. Because if they keep him, the cap hit is even more than 21. It's in that 30, up to there. So the way they structured that contract, it felt like this was kind of coming here. So you cannot save that $21 million. So they're going to do it in some form. I very well can see him ending up back on the Chiefs. It's one of those ones, or he can end up somewhere else as well. That's possible. Teams looking for a 4-3 defensive end. Very, very possible there. But this is one of those ones where a lot of these guys we're talking about, like, I said, I think they'll probably end up, most of these guys will probably end up on a different team. But a guy like Frank Clark, I could see him kind of making his way back. Not going to guarantee anything there. But I can guarantee that they won't, the current structure of that contract, they won't leave it alone. We'll put it that way. I can guarantee that. They will not leave that alone where it's at. Next one, Shaquille Griffin, the cornerback from the Jags. They just signed a couple off seasons ago. Was very solid cornerback for the Seahawks, but played a little bit for them earlier this year. Wasn't all that solid. Wasn't awful. I mean, he did have some hiccups here and there. And then been injured since early season. And I think some of the other guys have played pretty well for them. You look at Tyson Campbell, you look at Darius Williams, and they have a few good Tavon Campbell, Trey Herndon. They got a couple other corners that can play as well, and they've been doing a good job drafting these guys. And they signed Darius Williams last offseason. So, and the Jags spent a lot of money last offseason, a lot of money. So they're a little tight on cap space. They're actually projected negative this offseason, so they need to find ways to clear space. So Griffin might not even be a guaranteed starter for them because they like some of the other guys. He's coming off an injury. Griffin was more of a zone coverage corner. The Jags are trying to mix it up a bit. We see a lot more man this year with their new defense. And again, those other corners might fit better. They're cheaper. So therefore, Griffin, cut him, you free a good amount, 13.5, and that kind of helped big time with your a little bit of a being tight on the cap space. We'll put it that way. So that one made a lot of sense to me. They could look, a lot of these guys, teams could look to trade first, and it's very possible. Guys like Kendricks, guys like Griffin, guys like that. So we'll see. And then one more, and I do want to talk about the Saints, and we'll see why we'll talk about the Saints when I get there. But Ronald Darby, another corner here for the Broncos. They can move on from him and clear $10 million. Now, Darby's a pretty decent corner, and the Broncos were a lot of man coverage before this year. And Darby, I think, is good, in a scheme where some zone. You got to have some zone in there, and they ran a little bit more zone this year, so some more cover 4 out there. So it was looking pretty good for Darby, but then he got injured and he was out for the season. So I do think he fits the Broncos, and I do think he's a solid corner if healthy. Him and Surtain, very, very solid. So looking at it that way, why would they cut him? Well, $10 million is a pretty good amount. They are playing Damari Mathis a lot, the rookie from Pittsburgh, who has a lot of upside. He's looked pretty good. Pretty tight in coverage. The defense has been just fine, without Darby. Darby has an injury concern, and you can free that $10 million again, which is a pretty good amount. So for those reasons, I think they move on from Darby, free that space, and focus on things like linebacker, getting, cooping that pass rush together, maybe offensive line, re-signing some guys there, things like that. So Darby, I think they can definitely move on from him, clear that $10 million. But injury's been a concern throughout his whole career. That's the issue. But a pretty damn solid corner if he's on the field. So those are the 10 NFL starters, or they were starters at least at the beginning of the year, but a lot of these guys are starters right now, if not injured, that I think could be available. And I think a good amount of these guys will be. There was some that I kind of guaranteed throughout this video, a couple of the Titans guys, guys like that. I know the Chiefs will do something with Frank Clark. They're not going to leave that alone. Some good players that, everyone's kind of taking a look at that free agent list right now. Who can my team get? Some teams, some fan bases are in free agency mode, but, people forget about these guys that could become available. Some interesting, good options. But I did want to talk about the Saints. Not just because they're an intriguing option, because they're always weird with the cap or they're always got to work their way out of it, but because I knew the Saints were in that situation, where they're going to have to do something with their roster to clear space. Multiple different things like they always do. So I wanted to include some Saints guys in the top 10 starters that could be cut, but it's a little tricky at the same time. So not only do they have a unique situation with the dead last in cap space, it keeps scrolling up on me, but negative 57, that's probably going to go up. Usually it goes up. And they've dug themselves out of that hole in the past, but it's also hurt their future by voiding contracts, restructuring contracts, and they haven't been able to make the big signings at the time because they're too busy working their way out. But not only that, but again, they have to make some cuts. But it's interesting because there's guys I want to put in this video. Michael Thomas hasn't, worked out for them, and there seems to be a little bit of beef going on there too. So I thought that was a possibility, but you go ahead and cut him, and it only frees $2.811 million. Saints could use that. Any amount is good for the Saints, but is it worth it? And you see the dead cap is listed here. So dead cap is basically, people get confused, it's basically what you can't save. So that's like cap space that they're missing out on, but they still will have see the number up here, 2.811 million more than what they had right at this second. So they would clear that amount. But is it worth it? You'd rather keep Michael Thomas unless they like, this guy's not going to play for us. Then they'll cut him. So it's a guy I didn't really feel great about including in that top 10, the 10 players we talked about previously. And another one is Jameis Winston, which I was very, very close to still putting in the video. But it's so tricky because it only frees $4.4 million. Would you rather keep a quarterback that is experienced with us than save that $4.4 million? It's a debatable thing, because Dalton's got to be gone, but it just seems like they don't like Winston. Is it going to be a new staff? Does the new staff like Winston? Do they just free that 4.4? It wasn't great the way they structured that contract, either the way they've been handling contracts in the cap space. It kind of goes back to that year they made a Super Bowl run, which it was kind of worth it that year, it felt like, because it's like, all right, we're trying to win now. Let's make this roster as good as we can make it, but they fell short, so it ends up being kind of a fail, and it's kind of led them to this point, which is a bit of a disaster, and they keep giving out these weird contracts like Jameis Winston, like, Taysom Hill. I like the last contract from Hill. I haven't liked the one now. So it's a little tricky here. But those are the two guys that popped in my head. When making this video, I had all these guys pop in my head, and I went and looked at the numbers, crunched the numbers. Do they make sense with the situation? And the Saints end up being a little tricky. But there's other guys. I mean, what happens if, just to show everyone, what happens if you cut a guy like Pete, who is solid guard but can't really stay healthy? You only save 1 point. It's not worth it. You keep him. You definitely keep him. They're not going to cut Cam Jordan, but he's up there in age. You only save 2.1. I just think it's not going to happen. And there's other guys you're definitely keeping. Onyemata's very good. He's getting up there in age, maybe, but he's very good. You don't save anything, so they're not cutting him. Just to show people here, Matthew maybe wasn't as good as we thought. Still a good player. You cut him, you lose cap space, so they're not going to cut him. Marcus May, you lose. I don't love how they structured that one. They actually lose money there. Well, Davenport's going to be a free agent, so that he shouldn't even be on there. And there's so they're basically going to have to go. They're in a bad situation. They're going to have to go in, and they're going to have to restructure contracts again, which pushes money back into further years, and then makes them have negative again those years. And they do a lot of the void deals, which I don't love, but sometimes they have to. I mean, even looking at Jameis Winston's contract. There's already void years on this. So it's one more year left. You don't save a whole lot. We already went over that. But then they're going to be paying these cap hits on the void years. So it's tough. So they're going to have to go in, restructure some contracts, push money back. And that just makes it, and I know a lot of people out there go, well, they're just going to, it doesn't matter that they're negative. They're going to get out of it. Half of that's true. Half of it's not. They're going to get out of it because they're going to cut some guys, but there's not a lot of savings from the cuts, as we can see. They're going to restructure some guys. They're going to void some guys within the restructures, and they're going to clear that space. But that's not really a good thing, obviously. You're in the position where you have to do all this work just to get back down to zero, and you can't really do a whole lot. So they're kind of stuck with the same old aging players that have injuries, why they're very beat up every year. And they're kind of trapped with that. And there's still some guys that are aging that are very good. Cameron Jordan, Latimer's still young, but Demario Davis, examples, just examples there. There was some Alvin Kamara trade rumors last year. I don't think it's going to happen, but what happens if they trade him? They only free 1.172. Now, if you get some good draft picks out of it, then maybe worth it. But we didn't check Taysom Hill. What happens if they cut Taysom Hill? Negative 9.85, and he has void years on his deal too, so you're paying for him for a long time. So it hasn't been great the way they structured these contracts, and they just created a big mess, and it's kind of a big cycle. So that's why when people say the Saints are in one of the worst situations in football, it's actually accurate, and that's what they mean. So it's a little tricky situation. I'm curious to see what they do this offseason. They could still make big moves, but they just have to restructure and push more money down the back, and they'll be even more negative in the future. But at least you get better if they do that route. So, I'm not going to sit here and say they're not going to be able to do anything in the offseason. They won't be able to do this, that. We can't sit here and say that. But it's just a big messy situation. So I did want to talk about the Saints, not because of the messy situation necessarily. It kind of goes into that, but because I wanted to put players in the actual video, because the Saints are a team that's going to have to make some moves like this. But it's tricky with mainly looking at Michael Thomas, Jameis Winston. Like, is it worth it? Those are the main guys I want to talk about. And I think people probably would bring up Taysom Hill, like cut Taysom Hill, but no, it's negative. They lose space. So it's a weird situation here. And we can do more videos like this, closer to the offseason as well. We got you. We're crazy with the offseason. We got you guys covered with all kinds of videos for cuts, free agency, the draft. We got you. But let me know your guys' thoughts if you think I left somebody out in this video. Of course, more decent players are going to get cut. There's some guys that are kind of borderline for me. Will they get cut? Will they not? Byron Jones, Trent Brown, guys like that. Just to list off a couple there. But yeah, let me know your guys' thoughts. We're always talking with you guys on Twitter. Full NFL coverage here. Like, subscribe, turn notifications on. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.